Hello. This is a brief overview of the components for my LD35 Compo game, Terminal Shift. Fundamentally, the game is simply a 1 meter square platform that the player stands on in a Steam VR environment. It stays entirely stationary, and instead, these prefabs are instantiated, like so, by this scrolling environment object, and they are flung past to form a corridor. And all in all, that strategy seemed to work really well to make it so you could have an infinite corridor that didn't run into any floating point issues dealing with large numbers. Let's see. So, of all things, audio turned out very well. Um, I did just a very short Foley session, walking around with a voice recorder and just trying out things in the apartment. The MVPs of that wound up being um, getting all of these out of dragging a knife on a cutting board while pinning the audio recorder to the cutting board itself. I'm curious how this sounds, whether or not it plays them in sequence. Nope. So a lot of these were very simple, but they worked pretty well for a stone grinding sound. These were much stranger. So when the platform changes shape, uh, apologies, expecting that you've seen the gameplay, a snippet of gameplay video first. This is not a setup where I can actually. Oh hell, let's give it a shot. So, point of view, it's rather terrible. Oh, that's ow. Lucky streak. As you can see, the actual headset's upside down at the moment. So this is the basic game. It's just a hole in the wall. All I had time for was two distinct shapes, an X and a Y, and it's just 90-degree rotations therein, with the X being nice and cheaty. So, to give coverage, that's the basics of the game. So, what goes into it though? Um, VR's or Steam VR crashing, good times. So right, these are the knife drags. These were a plastic razor blade being dragged across a wood drawer, and it made these wonderful sounds. And it just seemed to nail that creepy sensation of something changing shape. Um, I actually threw out some of the sounds that sounded too much like the spider from Minecraft, but that's just how it goes. But that's just unfiltered how it actually sounds dragging that plastic razor blade around. These were wonderful. Uh, this is taking a small batch of spaghetti, rolling it up in a kitchen towel, and then snapping it. And is a lot of fun. I highly recommend trying it out. Again, wrap in a kitchen towel to contain the mess, so then it's easy to toss out the small amount of spaghetti that did go to waste. But it made these wonderful captures. Last one. Um, oh, and these were beautifully simple. They were just actually just blowing and trying to find the right distance and orientation for the microphone to have it actually sound like remotely like wind. Um, and more later on how these guys actually got combined together. It's doing random, essentially random samples and blending them all together to generate an infinite progression to hide any looping going on. And that bit of code is a little hacky, but totally worth keeping, or cleaning up and then keeping. Um, Great. Materials just wound up generating. Um, Actually, I guess a little bit more on audio. Uh, these crunches. I played around with making. let's see, where is it? Death Crunch Audio. Yeah, trying out a custom reverb filter to put a very long delay on it, and that really nailed the that echoing. I mean, it sounds like a crunch in a cavern. It was great. So highly recommend quickly experimenting with reverbs here instead of in Audacity. It was far better to iterate here and try to find the right values. So more or less, that is the audio samples. Textures, there were only a couple. I just really didn't have time for anything else. And let's see. Uh, where is it? Oh, sure. Yeah, so they really wound up. Oh, that is missing a period in its name. Ha! Yeah, used, was it Microsoft Expression Design, which is free at this point, and it actually wound up working pretty well for texture generation. This texture, while crude, let's see, while crude, it totally sufficed to just kind of bring things home. The final look is actually done almost entirely through lighting and the cheesy use of keeping the default skybox and getting all the various color shades just out of keeping that around. I tried killing the skybox, everything looked flat and terrible. That's what undo is for. And so that worked out. So yeah, just one basic texture to get up and running, and I ultimately never needed to change that. And then just cooking up my own drop shadow that had a very dark center, uh, which helped immensely for sense of presence and knowing where your footing was. And this is a shadow projector, or rather a lighting projector that is coming straight off of the let's see, it's attached to the player's head, um, and I just threw together a stupid script that just forces it to stay pointing in a particular direction, um, and that worked amazingly well to just let you know where your feet were by just projecting a shadow straight down from the head. Keep it simple. That was a win. And then likewise, I attached a dim light to the player's head, and that also helped define the platform that you're standing on. And yeah, so simple shadow, light source, um, just to let you better understand your surroundings, and that was pretty much it for spatial awareness. Let's see. So that's pretty much textures. Uh, right, and then just creating a whole bunch of materials off of that one texture. It was temporary, but it wound up shipping, if you will. Um, all the models were cooked up in Blender. They are all stupidly simple, yet were incredibly time consuming to create. I learned a lot about Blender, and I will more strongly avoid it in the future. Eh, oh well. Or at least better know how to use it. Learn your tools ahead of time. That was the lesson. Um, right, these dudes. So, this is that looping audio blender. Worked amazingly well. Um, it takes the one audio source that is already present and it duplicates it, and then it just sits there and flips back and forth between the two audio sources. So it's not churning creation and deletion of components. Um, and it just tries to schedule them against each other so that they blend between each other uh, for as long as possible, up to half the length of a clip. Um, so if they're all about the same length, it means it's constantly blending, and if they're clips of very different lengths, it means that it'll blend very quickly at the end of the longer clip. Other than that, it worked out great. It just needs a little bit of cleanup where I'll push it down to two sub-objects to make it so that this can actually be cloned. I was shocked actually to find out that it's hard to clone a component without getting into C# reflection, which I just really didn't want to do on this time scale. And then the other guys were a just stupidly simple one-shot audio player, where it gives it you give it a list, it picks one at random, gives it a random pitch. Yeah, option to destroy, pretty damn simple. So all of these guys work that way. So all of the one-shot sounds are wastefully just creating game objects that just persist until the sound's done with, and then poof, they're gone. And that did make it really easy to, of course, make the audio spatial to make it so you actually hear that it is the platform making those sounds, and that the wind is located, up above the platform where it's whipping around, and adding that little bit of actual positioning on the sounds seemed to help, just in general for making the sound enjoyable in VR. Oh, yeah, these segments. These are atrocious in terms of lighting. So many light sources. Just, I feel bad about that. I mean, once you got a populated shaft and just see the light sources, it seemed to work. So, screw it, ship it. Ugh. But yeah, these guys worked out pretty well, where they're just compositions of the basic models and what have you. Let's see. Oh, I originally tried making it so that there was actually a script that faded the lights in and out to handle the ends of the shaft uh, going into blackness, and it just didn't look good. The fog use looks bad when it's pulled in super close and you kind of look carefully, especially in VR, but all things considered, it was better. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's see. Oh, yeah, these are stupidly simple. Oh, all of these are also marked up, every single one of these platforms. And I don't know what people typically do, but I had this concept of the prefab inventory just so I could quickly actually see these in world. Because it didn't seem like I could easily edit these over here. So it was a bit awkward, but this worked out. I just don't know if that's what people usually do for things that get randomly spawned, because the normal thing when starting the game is all of these should be disabled. Right, but all the platforms were marked up with an obstacle object, and this is how the player platform knew what shape it needed to be, and also whether or not cheatiness on the orientation was allowed, how to handle the letter X, basically. As you can see, more letters were planned, but see previous note about Blender just not working out this time around. I must have been Blender for Dummies or something. Google was saving my butt, but not quite enough. It is mostly difficulties dealing with their Boolean modifier and just getting all sorts of bizarre results. Right, so that's the elevator shaft segments, which this guy, I was quite happy with how this actually turned out in the end. There's an inventory of registered prefabs. They all have a weight. It ultimately wound up being one. It was present for other reasons, though, but it would make it so it would be easy to bias towards one type of segment or another. And this is just stupid debug stuff that is visible so that I could see when we start up that it actually analyzed the geometry to figure out how big all of the segments are. They wound up being uniform shape, but I had some plans for non-uniform ones. Still glad that I learned how to take advantage of analyzing mesh bounds, um, just to make the game code more generalized. I understand it can be marked up in other ways, because that is entirely reliant on flat tops, flat bottoms for this strategy to work, but it worked out. Let's see. Right, and uh, the analysis was also useful for stuff like when it's generating the shaft. Um, During the normal rest of it, it guarantees a certain amount of space between obstacles to actually give you time um, to orient for them. Let's see. Right, so that was the prefab inventory. And got the platforms, right, which are mostly just wrappers to fix up the orientation, because difference in axes and all that. Right, the player platform wound up being a total bloody mess. Learn in the future to, if not break down into more components while loading something, at least push its parameters into structures to make them collapsible. It worked, but could have been better. Um, at least it's got some nice generalizations. I mean, just kind of stuck with that where possible. But yeah, this guy was pretty funky. Right. Wind speed sound increases, which again, we're not able to really take advantage of anything um, coming from the actual Unity audio system to automatically at least adjust volumes based on velocity. Because technically, the platform just isn't going anywhere. It's tracking its own velocity um, because it is just flinging the shaft upwards around it. Um, Silliness. Let's see. Anything else actually interesting? Using the colored fog as a way to indicate a death screen wound up working out pretty well. I'd use that again. I intentionally wanted to avoid just even digging into using any fonts, and honestly, just setting the whole screen blood red and pulling in your vision to just 7 meters away worked pretty well. Well, that and doing it in conjunction with it gets the message across. All right. Why do I have three? Huh. Mysteries for another time. I don't know why there's three fog manipulators on here when only one would be needed. Eh. Oh boy. Um. Right. So, whatever. There's small details about objects it creates at runtime. Doesn't really matter all that much. Um. Let's see. Scripts got right. Uh, just seeing if that's actually about it. I mean, tons was learned during this, but I think that's actually about it for presentable stuff. Um, Again, like actually doing the Foley work and learning, actually getting into the audio mixer setup um, was great. This wound up being tuned. It's odd we're played out of desktop speakers. It's pretty quiet as a game mix, but I was aiming for the headphones on the release Oculus Rift, and so that's where all these values came from. And I was pretty happy with actually being able to assign categories and adjust these various somewhat dynamic sounds on the fly. Um, this is great tech. I would absolutely recommend that people check this out um, as part of their time for a game jam. I think that's about it. Yeah, I mean, out of everything, this looping audio blender is something I would keep. It's just not much code. It was just a little bit of noodling on the problem, and the answer was actually rather simple. Uh, all the source code's available on GitHub, so that would be the way to grab it. And again, all I would change about it is make it so that uh, it gets a hold of the audio source as a child object, so that it can actually duplicate it in a Unity supported way in order to get that back buffer style usage of ping ponging back and forth between two audio sources. I think that's about it. If you've been watching and listening to this rambling tour, thank you for your time. I hope that this was in any way useful. And again, of course, all sorts available. Um, just entirely using free tools. Yeah, this was 48 hours really well spent. All right, have a good night.